Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. I want to first off apologize for being late and making the gentleman here wait. And I wanted to just apologize in general to making everybody else wait. My timings had, due to my general neglect and forgetfulness.
We've been later.
It's true. We have seen later. Winterstorm says, "Good afternoon, all. Back from a week of training.
Nice.
Good to know. Always good to see you."
Have you been drinking your electrolytes yet, buddy?
Got it right here.
Good man. All right.
You know what the thing is?
We're good now.
I haven't had a coffee yet today.
All right.
Of course, I haven't been
Just
drinking
trying to get to
coffee
the bottom of it before
at
it
all
starts.
in general forever. So yeah. So Patrick, good afternoon. Good to see you. So we have before we get into any sort of topics or anything like that, I do want to make sure that everybody is liking, subscribing, and notifying, especially Patrick there, who I left his banner up, but still make sure everybody does that. Any thoughts? Anything on the top of your guys' heads? I know this was kind of last minute and I just kind of jumped in everybody, but anything on the top
I'm
of your
just
minds?
curious why you're wearing a rash guard. I just noticed it.
You just noticed it? I figured
What's
it was
going on?
kind of surreptitious, but no, Master Silvio Bering, 8th degree coral belt, is in town for our gradings.
In the house.
I did mine yesterday, and as you can see, the purple belt in the background.
What's going on?
Let me just. There we go. Now everybody can see it. Yes. So that was yesterday for me. I got upgraded to purple belt, and then Arden had his symposium for the kids was today, and I was helping out there and make sure all the kids were doing stuff and lining everybody up and tying belts. And
how'd that all go? More importantly, how'd it go for him?
He did really well. He got a 3rd stripe on his gray belt, and working hard, getting her done. Still loving every minute of it, and he got his gi signed today.
Ooh.
So it was very special. That's actually what took us a lot. We were waiting in line, just like looking at the clock. But he enjoys it. He actually gets to hang out and chat with Master Bering, who he's now seen 3 or 4 times now. So
pen pals.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
See what I did there. Whatever. We'll just bypass it. Whatever.
We'll edit that out later.
Whatever.
Winterstorm asks, "Can we get some merch with pieces of blue tape on it for Glenn?"
Good call. Good call.
I like it a lot.
We should sell just blue tape strips right on the merch site, buddy. I'd like to buy 10 strips.
10 strips, please. Just little.
I'd like a 10 pack.
Strips.
I got some shooting coming up. I'd like a 10 pack.
Hey, man. You know, there are ways to do it. I could put a little logo on it, every single one of them, and they'd just be like.
These don't work very well. They fall off the walls. Just saying.
Okay.
Wow. But they're inclusive, so there's that.
So now that you're a purple belt, Chance, you guys will start rolling? Or?
Hopefully. No, we have been.
See how it feels.
Yeah, you know, every once in a while, maybe
once a year, whatever. Yeah, when the master comes up,
maybe twice a year. Yeah, no, they actually did something pretty cool. Yesterday at the end of the symposium, they took all the black belts and they put them down on the ground, and then they lined up all the purple belts, blue belts, all the people that were there, and we just like filtered through them. So all the black belts were on the ground, and okay, you're up next. Find a dude, boom, roll. And if you get tapped out, you go to the back line. And so it was just like
that is true. That's true black belt efficiency. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm gonna go somewhere, lay on my back, and not really move off my back for the rest of the day. Next.
Is that how it is, Seb? Is that what it's like?
Yeah, man. You know me. I'm gimped up, so those shark tanks are not what they used to be.
Next.
It was actually pretty cool because I got to roll with a lot of the black belts we don't normally get to because it's for Northern Alberta. So gotcha. You have everybody from all the different Edmonton schools, Leduc, Edson, all that kind of area, and then Red Deer and Calgary are their own symposium on Sunday.
So for Northern Alberta, how many black belts do you think there are within the, was it the Bering Association? Is that what it's referred to as?
Yeah, the Bering Association has a total of 20 schools across Alberta. Yeah. And they have the Northern Alberta ones. There were 11 black belts. And then we had, I think 7 or 8, 3 or 4 striped brown belts as well that were, that had just got promoted to there or gotten the stripes, and they were all on the mats, but it was pretty good. And it ranged also, Professor Mike Yaklick just got his 4th degree as well from Master Bering as well. So it was a pretty good.
I'm curious, how many of those black belts / brown belts compete?
The ones that compete regularly, there's 5 or 6 of them that compete regularly. So there's, interestingly enough, Professor Tyson he's actually studying wrestling as well. So he's able to bring in that kind of extra little tidbit. And then there's others that are, the others that are competing regularly have their own little styles. And then we have others that are big leg lockers, and they train and teach that. And so we share all that information amongst each other. It's pretty cool. It's a nice little system.
My final unimportant question is this. Do y'all refer to each other as professors? Like, are you now a professor now that you're a purple belt, or how does that work?
Technically, I'm a monitor. Thank you very much.
But you're a monitor, Chance.
Monitor Chance. Yeah,
gotcha.
No, you're only professor if you are running a school. Thank you very much.
Oh, only if you're running the school, then you're a professor.
Running a school.
Oh, a school. All right.
Yeah. You got to be a black belt instructor with the red bar and all that stuff. So I can't call Seb professor yet. Unless you got a red bar. Did you get your red bar?
What do you mean? I do have a red bar.
You are? Okay. Well,
I do run a school.
Well, when we...
And I like to call him Professor Seb. He doesn't like it, but I like to call him Professor Seb.
I'm going to call you Professor from now on, Professor Seb.
No, you are not.
I know it annoys people like Seb so much. He's now Professor.
The reason I was unsure was when you came to Edmonton, you were rolling. You had a black with the white bar on it. I thought, I was like, is that just an extra belt that you have, or?
No, the reason why I do this is because when you're a visiting black belt in somebody else's gym, is just to basically illustrate, like I have a black belt, but I'm not one of your black belt, and it shows to everybody else that you're not a black belt from that gym. So if there's anything knuckleheadish that happens, you're actually not one of theirs. And it's just a courtesy thing. It's basically, and some gyms, if you look at Hicks and Gracie, and Cron Gracie over in LA, they actually will not let you wear the black belt unless you have it from them.
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
Which in itself is quite weird in the jiu-jitsu world.
Much.
But yeah. But I do believe that wearing the white bar to say, like, I'm a visiting black belt, I'm not one of yours, is respectful in my opinion. So that's why I do that.
I like
That's awesome. I've never noticed that before. But I don't really pay attention to belts so much. I wouldn't be looking for a red bar or white bar on a black belt. I'd just be like, oh no, it's a black belt. But I think that's a great rule of thumb.
I do too,
honestly.
It's also used for competitors. So when competitors go compete, they'll often wear a black and white bar. If they're not teaching ever and they're just competitors, they will wear that also. So it has a few applications, but definitely I find it great for visiting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The for us, if you're not an actual instructor in the system, you can get your black with white, but not. You have to do a year's worth of instructing in order to get the red bar. So for 2 guys that got promoted last year to their black belt, they were given the black with the white bar because they hadn't been instructing. They had just been training. But they just got their red bar now after a year worth of instructing. So it's all kind of doesn't really matter at this point. But the one thing we do want to know is Winterstorm asks, if one of you is the professor, who's Marianne?
That's nicely done. Nicely done. Well, we're all on a little island called Earth, so who knows?
It could be anybody.
So, really. Seb, I'm curious. Where are you at right now?
I'm at the We Defy Foundation annual ambassador meeting here in Wilmington, Delaware.
Fantastic.
And I am surrounded by savages. And when I say this, I mean savages. We are talking about 3, 4, 5th, 6th degree black belts that are also special forces operators, that are also combatives instructors, and savages. It's a terrifying room, and it's a great place to be.
The only thing that's left is if there's good coffee there, how come I'm not there? That's what I'm talking about, Seb. That's what I'm talking about.
Because the coffee is the one thing that'll keep you away, right?
Hey, if everything goes according to plan, Shaun, I anticipate you'll be with me in a lot of those meetings one day.
That would be nice. So that's a nice area. I've been down through that way before in one of my former careers, and I'm not sure what part of town you're in, but it can be quite fancy, boy. I mean, it's quite nice around that way.
I was shocked, to be honest, because it's the way it maps out kind of looks like it's close to New Jersey, but I was in an area of New Jersey that looked really, really good, and I showed up here. I have a room overlooking the river. It's absolutely beautiful. It's been sunny since we've been here. Apparently, it's supposed to change on Sunday. But no, it's been an incredible experience. I drove also, so what I did is I flew into Montreal and I rented a car and drove from Montreal to here for 9 hours, and then so this entire New York State drive was mind blowing. It's
well,
so
of
nice.
Course, dude. I mean, driving that long, you're totally caught up on all of the -collective.ca potties by now.
I am.
Totally caught up.
I am. And I also listened to 3 other podcasts.
Oh, I was only teasing.
Yeah, no, but I am. I've listened to absolutely every single one of them.
Oh, wow. Sorry about that. Who else were you listening to?
There is a podcast that I follow. Give me 1 second here. I'll give you the title of it because it's absolutely phenomenal. It's called the Irregular Warfare Podcast, and that
sounds nice.
And it's basically to bridge the gap between academics and operational people in the context of counterterrorism. So it's very, very it's mostly think tank that are coming, to have these conversations, but we are talking about oftentimes they're 4-star generals that also have a PhD and whatever. So it's really, really cool. And it's actually quite fascinating. And they're very short. They're like 45 minutes each, and each of them have a specific topic, and they just launch into all kinds of stuff. Lots of great academics, some people that have spent lifetime studying certain fields, but also have an operational segue into those same fields. So it's just very enriching, especially for me in my degree right now. Like, that is the perfect thing to listen to actually supplement my knowledge.
One of the one of the things that I kind of struggle with a little bit is I like having chats like this, nice and casual, and see where it goes and etc. But I also enjoy the mega nerd conversations, where it's with people who scare me because they're that smart. And I mean, I love these, but I also love those. But the two don't play well together. You can't just like free flow, yada yada, while you're in a room full of massive brains. It doesn't always work that way.
No, it doesn't. And I think one of the reasons why it doesn't is because you want to optimize the knowledge base that you acquire from them. So in order to do that, you have to be structured. You can't be just, and oftentimes what I like about this podcast specifically is I think it's put together by West Point and 2 other universities. So, and what they do is they don't have a regular host. They actually bring hosts from these various universities and all various backgrounds, and they're asking some very, very thought out questions that are very, unlike other podcasts that shall remain.
We'll never do that over here.
Thought out. Come on now.
But it leads into, it literally what it does is it cranks up the little wheel on these academics, and then it releases them, and they just go off on these mind-blowing tangents, and it's just amazing. Really cool.
That is the greatest image in my head right now of just taking some random academic and like twisting the wheel and then walking them up stage. That's fantastic. So, well, let me ask you this: what do you think has been your have you had any major epiphanies, takeaways from listening to that much podcast, but anything in general from them that you can allow the collective to learn from?
From the podcast itself?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to quantify. I mean, I've gotten a ton out of it. It's whatever context that we look at counterterrorism in the context of either in operational reality on how to prevent it or how to respond to it or whatever the case may be, but it breaks down every little possible context. So we're talking about, the virtual space, we're talking about communication space. So it literally takes a very, very tiny sliver of the counterterrorism operation, and it basically breaks down where the breakdowns are occurring, how to bridge certain gaps, what is the political ramifications of certain moves, and that kind of stuff. So it's actually really, you almost have to listen to them twice, every time, because you're missing so much valuable information. But if I had to say one thing that became quite apparent to me is the complexity of the counterterrorism operation is unfathomable. And we, as humans, we tend to simplify everything because then we can make sense of things slightly. But in a counterterrorism space, you actually cannot do that because simplifying gets people killed, right? So you really have to have the right people in the right conversations to make the right calls, because you can't make calls in a vacuum as a leader or as somebody that's actually engaged in the counterterrorism space, because you're going to miss an entire other side. So you really need to have these rooms essentially packed with people that understand how each of these modalities are interconnected. It's quite complex. It's very, very complex.
So while you were explaining that, I created a visualization in my head as don't even ask me why I do these things, but I was organizing my room of big brains, and I had decided that they were going to be split right down the middle. On the left flank are the fast thinkers, on the right flank are the slow thinkers. That doesn't mean that one's smarter than the other. It just means they think differently. And so I'm looking at my room, and all the fast thinkers are layered in the sense of prioritization of, tactical all the way through to strategic, and then same on the right flank. And I'm looking for my immediate feeds closest to me on the fast thinkers versus the slow thinkers. But everyone needs to be involved in that. But it's for me running the room to be able to read the room and run the room properly. You can't just put a whole bunch of people in a room and expect it to all work. So it's for the person who's running the room to organize the room so that it works best for the mission profile. And so I look at each mission, forecasting or as a thought experiment, the room would be configured a little bit differently each time. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you're, and this is, if you are the one making the call, and if you are the one that's qualified to make that call,
which I'm not. I'm just, I'm doing a thought experiment right now.
Yeah. But I guess the point I was making is the people that are engaged in certain spaces on the academic side that also have the operational know-how, that have all these things tied in, are generally the ones being brought into that room. These guys by now have written 10 books each, or they're out, being a 4-star general, leading an entire campaign out in whatever. And so by the level with which these guys are actually addressing the issues that we have in the counterterrorism space is unmatched, because they're,
I can imagine, yeah,
they're way up here. And so it's really interesting, but it brings all kinds of interesting points. So for example, I'm me, I don't do the whole conspiracy theory or anything like that, but I will say this. Look at 9/11, for example. So they're discussing 9/11 and how, theoretically speaking, the Al-Qaeda terrorists were actually a subset of the Taliban, and the Taliban was at the time in control in Afghanistan, which effectively makes what happened in 9/11 a declaration of war. Okay, so now it's like breaking down why this didn't happen and why it was treated as counterterrorism instead. And so now you have endless stream of information coming up and how it affects human rights in one way or another, and how, so there's so many things that we kind of take for granted. Terrorist attack, terrorist attack, terrorist attack, really declaration of war, like not treated as such for whatever reason. And then those are some of the reasons why this happened. So it's so complex, very, very complex, but it's great.
Well, I hope the lessons learned from then that are being thought about now will apply now for the future.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting when you look at a counterterrorism space is that the U.S. has not been victim of a large scale attack since 9/11. That's 20 years of solid work, because there's a lot of people that want to hit them. So by math and statistic alone, it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
But it's been 20 plus years. That is a massive achievement.
Sure is
in itself.
100%. I remember when.
Well, hang on a sec. Depending on, because there hasn't been any overt attacks. You're right. But there certainly are covert, and when you consider cyber warfare as the example is a classic. Sure. But what is a real classic covert warfare that you can say, well, actually we've been under attack for the last 20 years. Obviously, is the whole political sphere of manipulation by external agencies or by unfriendly agencies that are, distorting the growth of a nation to some degree.
Sure, and all of that has an impact. But as you know, when it comes time to assess risk in relation to events such as terrorism or anything like that, we know that physical harm takes priority.
Yeah,
right.
Agreed.
And so if you've done enough good job to reduce physical harm, anything else that comes after that will have some nefarious effects, or will have some obviously some ill effect. But also, people aren't dying right now, as a result of that. So at some point, you just it's very difficult, because and so with that, another sort of complicating factor is, once you've established a certain safety net, what happens to the population? What happens to politicians? What happens to everybody? Well, nothing happens. So clearly the threat is no longer there, instead of looking at it and saying, no, nothing happens because there's people working full time to prevent that. And so it's always a balance where you have to justify your existence, but also you have to continue doing whatever it is that you are doing. So you're basically trying to continue doing what you're doing. Your funding is being cut, all kinds of stuff that is happening as a result of stuff essentially not happening and people not remembering. But also, you need to essentially sell your services on account of remember. So it's like this vicious cycle where if things are going well, your funding and associated help is being cut on account of nothing happens. But if you do that, then something happens, and now you didn't do your job. So it's one of those things when it comes to physical security, physical safety. It's kind of like policing. It's really, really difficult to quantify, and that is the problem. What's even more difficult to quantify is what hasn't happened as a result of them doing what they're supposed to do. So how do you quantify that?
I don't know. It was a question I was asking myself when I was in Ottawa just a couple of weekends ago, standing in that room full of like freaking awesome, and no one knows anything about anyone in that room, in Canada anyway. And I mean, if only Canadians knew, but they don't. And that's kind of a problem to some degree. It's good that they don't know, but it's bad that they don't know. I don't know if the right balance has been achieved yet.
Well, there's a point where you can you work yourself out of a job, right? If you do
100%.
so well that there aren't any more terrorist attacks, then you'll be like, well, I guess we don't need you anymore. And then there's going to be more it's this vicious cycle, which is pretty hard. It actually goes into the concept that I want to talk about today, which is balance. So the question I have for you specifically, in outside the realm of international counterterrorism.
I don't know. I was enjoying the conversation.
I'm into it.
I mean,
I am.
I
am 100% into it. It's a great conversation.
The conversation's just really flown. Let's talk about fly fishing.
Well, no, let's talk about balance. Let's talk about balance, because this is what happens, okay? And we see it in it in the military. We see it in policing. We see it in everyday life. We see it in business. People will not balance their lives. They will put everything into one thing, right? They will work their butt off and leave their family behind, or they will put their whole life into the family and their career suffers, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, even today, I mistook many times in a row, had multiple issues, and my balance is off today because of it. So what I'm wondering, do the same tactics apply from international counterterrorism? Do those same tactics apply to daily life of just trying to maintain a balance? Do you think that those are interchangeable?
I think, to maybe draw a comparison, I'll just speak for myself. If some timings were missed today, that is so not a factor. I can't even begin to speak about it. It's just not a factor. The chaos that you get used to in, we'll call it, international terrorist work, the chaos is so extreme that, I mean, come on. You miss one timing, whatever. That's a non-factor. It's a mega fluid situation. And so life is just so fluid that you just don't even blink when other people blink. Now, how to get used to getting balance in your day because you missed some timings? I mean, more adversity, more chaos, more unusual timings, more diversity in the day will help someone understand how to create a wider bandwidth to create balance. If you're only used to running on a tightrope of you've only got one thing to do that day and you don't do it, life is chaotic. But if you've got 1,000 things to do that day and you miss one of them, it's a non-factor. So I think balance is contextual. I'm not saying that you don't have balance and I do. I might have less balance than you do. What I am saying is I've got enough going on in my day that if a minor blip happens, it doesn't even show up on the radar.
Which makes sense. The I guess maybe the real question that I am looking for is that because at least in my mind, the concept of balance should be the same, right? Depending on the levels, shouldn't really matter. The concept is still the same. You want to be able to fight terrorism, but also keep your job, right? So there's the levels to the game are not quite superfluous to it, but I'm just wondering if the concepts are the same. So if you take that same principle of, you work yourself out of a job and still have to sell yourself, can you apply those to your everyday life? Can you apply those to a desk job, an accountant who's spending all his day at his desk? You know what I mean? Is that possible, or are they two completely separate things? Seb?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Not sure? Okay.
It's your question. Refine your question a little bit, maybe.
Can the tactics used at a high level be applied at a low level, as well as tactics used in a low level apply to the high level, or are they very distinct and separate?
If you mean like someone who their job is an accountant and someone who is in tier 1, I think there's a lot of universal truths in life. You can call them tactics or strategies or whatever. It doesn't matter who you are or what your job is. I just think there's some universality in life. Now, as for specifics, I just can't draw a tight comparison between an accountant and a tier 1 operator, or
they're a little different,
or anyone on this panel for that matter. Other than the universality of life, sure, but comparing two very different lives, I think, is hard to compare.
Oh, that's a good point, because they are very different. What about for the policeman in the house? Seb, what do you think? Can your tactics be interchangeable?
Yeah, actually, I think Glenn should go ahead because he's the only active.
Yeah,
and I almost said the same thing because he's the one who has the least amount of balance right now, in the sense of he's like a furious pace to get to where he's got, and it hasn't led up yet. So
I would love to take a stab at this, and I want to say thank you to you guys for having a great conversation. And I burnt my quesadilla yesterday. Caught me in a time warp.
It didn't look too bad, buddy.
You know what? It's okay. I think a lot of people pay for charcoal treatment to white their teeth.
I feel it was an upgrade.
Here we go. You know, when Chance was talking about putting up his question, I kind of thought immediately to the Ultimate Fighter when Chael Sonnen was the coach, and he was talking to a young Uriah Hall who was just a KO master, and Uriah Hall was talking to Chael. Says, "Hey, Chael, like I don't know what's going on. I can't perform, but I can perform." And Chael just kind of gave him a great example, and it really stuck with me for a lot of years. It's he said, "Hey man, same action, different environment. If I got you to walk on a 2x4 on the ground, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, what happens if I put it on a 2-foot step ladder, between two-foot step ladders? Same action, different environment again. And what happens if I put it on a 10-foot ladder? Same action, different environment." So I think what Chance's question, I think it's contextual, but there's at the baseline there are some concepts that will stay the same. It's I guess for me it's like, hey, am I resting enough? Am I eating well? Am I really putting the priorities that I need to prioritize number one? And at this moment in time, I kind of don't know what those priorities are, so I have to rely on my peers, my leadership, and everyone, even the people that I talk to every day, just getting my radio. If they're like, "Hey, you look kind of tired today," okay, that's something I'm gonna write down and figure that out. So I guess right now it's prioritizing what's gonna help me move forwards in the best possible way that I can maintain the integrity of what I'm learning and trying to apply it. Because if I just say eat 2 donuts and I'm good to go for a while and I'm making good decisions, but I don't know why I'm making a good decision, for me that's like fake it till you make it. And that's not what I want. I want to be able to understand, like, what am I learning so I can apply it again in a different way. So I think the nutrition talk that you guys have been talking about is really hitting it home too. It's like the fundamental things. If I don't take care of myself with proper sleep, nutrition, I'm not going to be sharp and effective when I'm working. And same thing with the workouts. Like, I want to do this. I want to get in like a 20-minute high intensity workout, but what do I need? So then there enters the want versus need. You know what? Maybe what's more beneficial for me is to open up my hips and get a zone 2 bike ride for 40 minutes. So that's kind of, I don't know if I answered the question, but I think I just kind of went on there for a little bit.
No, I like that. I especially like the line, same action, different environment. I really like that because I think that's kind of what I was aiming for, was the fact that I think that there are levels to the game, right? And you can't really compare a tier 1 operator in the midst of, war fighting. You can't really compare that to an accountant who spends too long at the office. But I think that there are tactics or procedures that you can do to alleviate some of those things.
You know what? I think that it's working for me now. I just didn't understand where you were going. But now it's generally how I'm categorizing this as domains. There are the emotional domain, the physical domain, and the mental or psychological domain. So those 3 domains, they have some similarity from accountant to ERT member. The similarities are whatever they are. And then the dissimilarities are things that can be made similar or improved on between the two of them, if you will. Because whether it's an ERT or a tier 1 or a whoever, the guy who runs the laundromat, it doesn't matter what your job is. Those 3 domains can always use improvement. And so here's a funny little twist to this, using the example of Uriah Hall, as you brought up, buddy. It's a good example. Because if you look at Uriah Hall's career, maybe about a decade, we'll call it, over that time, he was given that advice. And I've watched his career unfold, and he's never applied that advice enough to make it stick. Because a lot of his fights have been him failing mentally, being able to pull the trigger. He's got all the talent in the world. He's a physical specimen. I'm not saying he could be amazing in the sense of he isn't. I mean, he'd whoop my arse, but he could whoop it even more if he could apply that advice on a constant basis of don't look at the little thing that you're walking on. It doesn't exist. The spoon doesn't exist. Run your program the way you're capable of running your program. Don't get in your own way. Uriah Hall has always got in his own way. Every fight, he's always in his own way. He struggles to pull the trigger. His last fight that I watched, he kind of did. But prior to that, he had a bunch of fights that were like, not lackluster, were kind of boring though, because he just couldn't do what he is capable of doing. He couldn't take that advice.
Seb, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take it into a bit of a performance section because those are all really interesting points. I was at a certain CANSOF unit doing some resilience training, and one of the psychologists there was telling the story about how for fundamentally the people shooting in the context of tactical operation or in the context of war fighting or whatever, have to have an understanding of the basic mechanics, the fundamental mechanics that it takes to take the gun from the holster, to bring it on target, to target identify, and to deliver accurate rounds quickly, right? And we all know that, we all understand that. But when you have reached a certain level and you're at the tip of the spear, for example, thinking about your draw is actually creating issues mentally for you. And so that's where they were having issues with some guys getting into their heads because they're hearing a certain thing. And I'll make another quick segue after with another situation, but they would hear a certain things or focus on certain things that they should no longer have been focusing on because they had reached a level of mastery where they were able to deliver the exact same and their presentation and their set time was exactly the same every single time. So I don't want you in your head about making sure you have a proper purchase on that pistol grip, because if you start thinking about stuff like this, you're not going to make the timing. And that's what was happening, is they were actually telling them, stop thinking about this. You already have that. Focus on this, focus on the process. And so I'll give you another example of this. When I did the Air Marshal course, the pistol shooting is very fast. It's not crazy. It's not John Wick, but it's very fast. And one of the issues that I had was every time that the instructor on the lines were saying, you guys need to speed up. You guys need to speed up. You guys need to speed up. I was the only one on that line that needed to slow down. But every time they said that, I sped up and I sped up every single time. So now I was, delivering my rounds way too fast and not in the exact zone where they needed to be. And so at some point, one of the instructors kind of clued on that, and he came over to me and he said, except you slow down, and we were brand new. We were brand new in the program. We were only a week in, and there's like 3 or 4 weeks of super intense range time. It's like 10 hours a day or whatever, right? And it's all on pistol. So there's no, you're not going anywhere. You're just shooting pistol. But as soon as he came to me and said, except you, every time he said, you guys need to speed up, I slowed down, because I knew that I was good. I didn't have to worry about this, so I stopped thinking about it, which helped with the performance. And everything is history. So it's really interesting when you're trying to set that kind of balance. And I make that correlation between Uriah Hall, obviously, is exactly like that. He gets in his head over things he has mastered, and he gets in his head over things, physical gifts and athleticism and power and speed and precision, and all things that he's acquired over years of being a skilled martial artist that's gifted with also the genetic predisposition to be a savage, right? Let's call a spade a spade. And that's what happens, and that's why they have performance psychologists, that's why they have people that you can tap into to try to see what the mechanisms of your injury that's causing you to, because it is oftentimes it's trauma related, it's external validation related, there's all kinds of things that could be in play. But really interesting where you can take this.
Indeed. We have some really great comments here. Any other thoughts before I jump into some of these?
Yeah, just a little tip.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have any psychiatrists or psychologists or sports performance related kind of subject matter experts in respect to high-speed shooting, etc. So what I would do is, if I'm taught something, then I retain it, and I'm taught more and I retain it, and I keep building off of that platform until I've got a lot of stuff inside of me. And every time I put stuff inside of me, if I know I've got it squared away, then I shelf it. I offload it. I put it into my autonomous pile of the big pile of autonomous stuff that I've got right now. I've actually said it in the past. When I used to enter the room with a pistol in my hand, I would just think where I want the holes to go. I would see the holes. I just think hole, hole, hole. Or I'd think it faster than that. It'd be like pop, pop, pop. In my mind, I'd just think hole, 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 where I want the holes to go. And they would appear. I wouldn't have to concern myself with all of the motions. I wouldn't even see my weapons in my own hands. I would enter the room, look where the holes are, and they would appear. That's it. So I'd offloaded so much of it into an autonomous space that I could almost move around like a hovering ball from room to room, like a scanning hovering device, and making holes where they needed to go. I mean, if you work on it long enough and you offload it hard enough, you can keep recruiting new data until you've got it squared away, and then you just offload that.
Yeah. Glenn?
Yeah, I just had a question for Seb from the first example. Did the operators give a reason why they started thinking about their draw again? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's they might have, but they didn't to me.
Okay.
But I mean, anything, there's so many variables and so many things that can lead somebody to focus on the wrong things when it's performance based. Stress makes you do weird things. If you start considering the outcome and the possibility of the outcome, add to this, if you're on a tier 1 line and you have all these studs next to you, there's an extra level of peer pressure. And actually, I had a very long and very insightful conversation with sports psychologists before, who told me some guys that actually cannot perform in a team environment with their peers watching can actually outperform people in the combat space. So you have to be able to find the people that can perform with their peers, but they don't necessarily need to be the best performers as a result of those being two different types of stress. And I'm sure this is a gross simplification. Okay, so please, guys, don't take this to the bank. But a very interesting question. Like, what actually leads somebody to focus on the wrong thing? So for me, as a non-psychologist, that's a performance coach that trains or helps people overcome certain things with the people that want to go to the tier 1 or want to go to ERT or whatever. A lot of the times, I had one of my shooters call me one day, and he's like, hey, I've passed this course of fire like 100 times, and I went on the ERT course and I failed it 3 times in a row, got sent home. He's like, I need you to help me with my shooting. I'm like, has nothing to do with your shooting. None. right? And so with him, we what we've actually done is we've actually tried some things to see if we can trigger certain things. So we spoke about not thinking about the consequences or the outcomes, but thinking about each of the steps as we do with anything else. What is right in front of you, and what do you need to do so that you can put the round where it needs to go at the time in which it needs to go. And then if you do this at every bullet that you fire, the outcome will be what you want it to be. But if you start focusing outside, you're taking your focus off of what you need to be doing right now. So I don't care what the reason is. You need to focus on what you are doing right now. So if you logically override it, or if you override it using your prefrontal cortex by saying, this is 7 meters, I need to set before I take my first shot. I need to, and you really kind of like think about what you need to do in that space to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. So we did that. And then the second fold was he was actually taking a shot timer, and he was doing the shot timer himself. So now he knew when the shot needed to go because he was pressing the shot timer. Now he gets on a course where somebody else is controlling the shot timer, right? So he doesn't know when it's coming. So that's a massive difference in terms of stress management. And it's kind of the same if you're the type of person that really, really loves to push physical training, but you never had anybody control the parameters. Now you go to a place and somebody else puts the workout on, and you are not happy with that at all. And I've seen more guys in extreme physical condition, like in great physical condition, fail those courses on account of having lost control of the reins. So I launch into a giant diatribe here, but there's a lot of things that you can do. I can call Chance and say, hey, Chance, I'm going to give you a hopper with all kinds of modalities in there. And every day I want you to call me at 5 a.m. and say, this is what you're doing in 3 hours, or today you need to run 15 kilometers, or you need to do a rock march, or you need to do whatever the case may be. And so that way I'm not controlling what it is that's occurring. So my brain gets used to performing tasks that are not dictated by myself. And anyway, so those are little tricks, but definitely,
I like that.
I like that. Kind of went on a massive tangent, but
hey, it's all
awesome,
good.
Man.
Not really.
I think
it was in theme.
Yeah,
honestly.
Absolutely. And I was actually, as you were that last section there, I was thinking that I remember having instructors always tell me it's easier to be an instructor on a run than it is to be on the run.
Of course.
When you're done.
Unless. So that is true. If the people who are on the run or in the run, let's say there's 30 guys in the run and they're all infantrymen. Well, if I'm running 30 men in a run, it's easy because they're squared away. They know what's up. But if I'm running 30 combat engineers, it's way more difficult because I know 10 of them are going to get lost, etc. And so, you know what I'm saying? When you're running a group, it's very dependent on the group. And so it can become complicated. Even if you've got one outlier who doesn't meet the common denominator, now they're the problem. All of a sudden, your job is multiple times complicated by one single individual. And so that's something that is similar to that performance stress that people aren't used to. So a course of fire, someone's on it 3 times, they fail it 3 times. Well, the first time they fail it, they go to bed and they can't sleep because they're all up in their head. And then the second time they fail it, it's because they didn't have enough sleep. And then the third time they fail it, it's because they had even less sleep. And so if a person isn't used to these kind of stresses, now all of a sudden, listen, I've had roommates in the past in various performance-related sort of events, we'll call it, where they spend half the night pacing up and down in the hotel room or in the hotel hallway. They just aren't used to the performance that they're about to face. And so performance stress starts before the performance if you're not used to dealing with performances. And so the other aspect is that One thing that becomes more and more difficult the higher up you go in the training system is at the beginning of a training system, someone will say to you, "Hey, you know what? You've got all day to do 10 push-ups." But then at the other end of the spectrum, someone says, "You've got a whole day's worth of work to do in the next 12 minutes." And so the performances are very different. Now, you can make the argument that when someone first starts out in the system, they don't know much. And when someone's in a point where they're trying to do a whole pile of things in 12 minutes, they've probably been in the game long enough to also do that. But here's the difference. We're still humans. And no matter how good to go you are, the more things you have to do in less time, there is a certain breaking point where you can only process so much stuff. So in tier 1 as an example, or for Seb as the example, when he was on a shooting program for Sky Marshal, well, you've got a lot of things on the go in split seconds. And the more you do it, the more you can process. But there's a certain point when you reach your capacity of processing. And it's at that point that I find that some people can work with that. And some people not panic, but some people start corrosively slipping backwards in the sense of, I'm starting to lose it. And it's the split seconds of a lot of data, a lot of bandwidth. Not everyone can process that. And then it starts creating an imbalance in the moment. So, you know, it's not always just an amount of time that can get someone there. It's not everyone that can process milliseconds with a lot of dense bandwidth.
Yeah, you know, Shaun, this is a bang up point, and it brings me to a bit of another observation. So when I was on the Earth course, during the CQB block, which is where we lose the majority of people, and I know it's the same, or it's very similar for CanSoft, I between entries, I used to sleep. So it was balaclava down, bang, 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 get out of the room. Okay, you're up. Balaclava down, in the room, out. There were some guys that were making notes coming out of entries. They would, and then they would be given some feedback. So they would make a ton of notes on it, and then they would go inside the next entry, bringing the feedback of the last screw up with them, but forgetting all the feedback prior or what they did correctly or didn't do correctly. So they would screw up something else. So now they would get feedback on that, and then they stayed, you know, in that space for a week. And then on the second week, they were far behind the instructors. Like the focus was on them. They were in a vicious cycle, because what would happen to their self-confidence would really impact their performance, because now they knew where they stood in space and time in relation to their peers, which increased their stress. And it's just, once it starts snowballing like this, see you later. Like it is not
once you
happening.
Start seeing the disconnect, once you start realizing that, oh, it's me. Once you start realizing that, that's the time that you are at a branching decision. And it's not one that you get to decide like this. Oh, I guess I'm the guy who's falling out right now. I guess I'm the guy who's failing. No big deal. I'm just going to turn the magic button that fixes everything. There is no magic button. And that magic button isn't also called shrugging your shoulders and just imagining that it's going to fix itself, because that won't happen either. Usually at that branching point where you're that guy who's starting to disconnect from the main group, that's about the time that really you're just relying on experience to carry you through, where you can think, oh, this is not good, but I've been here before. I know what I'm made of. Or when I was in this position last time, all I had to do was ... And so if there's no one telling you, if there's no one guiding you through that process, if it's just you at that branching point, really, you're kind of screwed unless you've got some experience to rely on, because magic don't work in those moments. And those moments are usually determined by split seconds at that point. So
yeah, 100%. So accurate. Yeah,
I like that. I like it a lot. So we have a number of comments here. I'm going to start pounding through some of these, but because there's some gold in here. And then there's a quick question at the end. But Silvercore states, Aristotle said, moderation in all things, including moderation. which I think is accurate, because you can't just sit on the fence your whole life. You got to be able to put your foot down on one side or the other at some point.
Agreed.
Funnily enough, I was studying Aristotle yesterday as I was considering time. I put up a little slow motion post about, time is A, the watch on your wrist, or the deeds that you do. And that kind of came out of studying Aristotle for about 4 hours yesterday. And so I could really take this sentence and build it out in all sorts of bizarre ways, but I feel like we don't have enough time.
I'm going to save it and we'll bring it up at another point in time.
Cool.
That'll be a good one to go into. He also, perhaps one key to keeping your balance is knowing when you've lost it. I think that is the first part of it for sure. That is the beginning of it all.
I feel like I lose it most days.
Daniel Labonte says, indeed, having a constant present awareness of self. And I think that is a very key thing. If you don't know where you are in space and time, you don't know. And you can't do anything with it.
Well, you can do something with it. You can start figuring out where you are in time and space. And if you failed up till now, then reach out and grab something called a friend. And now you're touching something in time and space. Get an anchor and then figure out what's surrounding you.
And then look around. I like that a lot. Here we go. This is a good one. If you're not paying inwards, you will not be able to produce outwards. This came in when you were talking there, Glenn, about understanding your nutrition and stuff like that. But I think it applies for all three of the realms that Shaun was talking about. It's not just your physical, but your mental and psychological, everything,
and everyone else.
Yep. This is a good one. The daily battle with self is indeed one that takes time to master to ensure consistency.
I don't even know if there's a mastering it for me.
Dude, I was just thinking, I'll never be a professor of that.
No, this is where people can write off other people's ability to deal with certain stress by thinking that they have reached some sort of level of mastery that allows them to do that, when in fact it's the constant battle. Everybody has that. So, very, very few people, I say it, not everybody, very few people have the ability to go through some things and not have the little voices interject. The question is what do you do with that? What do you do with that when it happens? That is the real question, right?
Yeah,
and
that's
yeah.
Well, I think Silvercore kind of nails it right here. He says, finding balance in life is an ongoing, individualized process that requires attention to all aspects of our well-being. And I think that's pretty accurate for it, for sure. And then there's one really quick question on this one that I think needs to be brought up, because Daniel asks, do you think those that have issues with balance in their life is due to wanting to do too many things at the same time? What do you guys think? Glenn, get your thoughts. You've been quiet the whole time.
Yeah, because there's a lot of awesome diamonds being dropped. I was kind of thinking about that, and I think people that have issues with balance in their life, and this is from my experience, is because I didn't push myself hard enough to find where my limits were.
I like that.
So I think that led for me to not have balance in my life. So it's like, okay, I need to find where my left and right limits are, what my threshold is. Okay, I fell apart there. Can I take a step back and can I just kind of gamify it a little bit? So instead of doing a big change, do a small one so we can actually understand what the change was and have more awareness of it.
I like that. Seb or Shaun, thoughts on this?
Go ahead, Shaun.
You're up, Shaun.
Okay, so I was thinking that I could talk about this a fair bit, but I'll only throw this out there. That people wanting to do too many things at the same time, I'm not sure what that means, because I do a lot of things. I'm into a lot of things, but I've been into a lot of things for a long time that just feel normal to me now because I've been doing them so long. And so the difference between that comment and someone who's doing a lot of things that they're dabbling in, now that's to me the main thrust of that question is if you don't have, I have balance because I'm not dabbling. But if you're constantly dabbling, how do you gain balance if everything's always changing because you're always dabbling? So that was just my initial thought.
I like that. Seb?
Yeah, it also depends. It's very contextual. I mean, is the person trying to achieve something that's so extremely difficult that they need a level of obsession temporarily? Like, is there, and so balance, what does it look like if you have to obsess over something to do it, to be as good as you can be? What the balance piece now comes into play is when is enough so that I can regain that balance and that I temporarily relinquished. So the question is extremely complex because there's a million different reasons why a person doesn't have balance in their life. And we can go on for a long time, but sometimes temporarily it's a choice.
I agree. Oh wait, I got one more. Squirrel. Back to Seb's comment about being told slow down when others were told speed up. When you slow down, you can fit more into your life. It's counterintuitive but powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think that's a great point too.
It's back to the old slow is fast.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Yeah,
I like it.
Which means something different for everyone. So I can.
Of course.
So if I'm moving slowly down or through life, I'm fitting in more than someone who is just new to going down that path. And so my slow life may be fast for someone else, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you think it might be the fact that slowing down allows you to be intentional, and then by either accepting that intentionality and utilizing it, that allows you to get fast? Or do you think it, because I don't really think the idea of just physically slowing down is always the answer. I think a lot of it is actually
to me, it's just processing bandwidth. That's how I think of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm on day 1 or day 10,000, it is of no consequence to me in any new skill or old skill. It just doesn't matter. It's the bandwidth of the day. It's the bandwidth of the moment.
I like that. I like that a lot. Bandwidth of the moment. Speaking of the moment, any final thoughts? Anything as we're running over an hour now? Anything off the top of your guys' head that we've talked about, or anything lasting that you want to get off? Yeah, Seb?
Sorry, since I already hijacked the entire conversation. One of the things that I mentioned in the very beginning, which I wish I corrected before, was about the Al-Qaeda being a declaration of war. Like, there is some contention surrounding that, and there is some theoretical axe to grind with that concept, but it is one of the consideration that hasn't been given consideration by very many scholars and politicians alike. And so, yes, it is contentious, but it is, by definition, it fits the criteria. Now, there's some nuances and things that could be, argued against. So I don't want to make it sound like it's an absolute. It was a declaration of war and wasn't treated as such, but it was a lot closer to a declaration of war than what we were told, right? Like,
that makes sense. Yeah.
I think the people who understand nuance will appreciate your comment.
I agree. Any how about Glenn? Any final thoughts? Anything on the top of your head?
No, man, just super stoked that you guys had me on again. It's always good to be in these conversations with you guys, man.
Yeah, it's always fun having you, brother. It's always nice. Shaun, any final thoughts? Anything top of your head?
No, nothing more to add other than how come I'm the underperformer in the t-shirt game today? Like, I came off my ride, I had 60 seconds to throw on a dry shirt, and everyone else shows up with game. I mean, what the hell, man? I'm the t-shirt underperformer today.
Well, every once in a while, we got to show you that you can technically underperform every once in a while.
I am certainly underperforming today.
So it's all good.
We got combat base. We've got a bearing. And then what do we got up in the top right corner there? I believe it is a brand new company.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Hey.
Yep.
Sure.
Good buddy of mine.
Good.
Can we see the back? You got I got your 6 one, or is it?
Oh no, it's just the same.
The logo one.
Yeah,
that's
just the logo.
Those are still nice.
I got one of each in there.
Yeah.
They're awesome. Sweet.
Yeah, I've been watching it sort of evolve. It's been fun to watch it. But again, my main point is, how come I don't have a good t-shirt on today? What the hell?
That is the question. How come you don't have one on?
You can have this one, Shaun, when I'm done rolling with Alan Shibero in an hour.
Yeah, make sure you don't wash it. I mean, just put it up ball it all up and throw it into a funky corner.
Oh no, I'll be dead. You can take it off my dead body.
Take off the corpse. Strip the corpse. Take it from me. I like it.
Dude, don't even worry. That first judo throw will be the end of the roll.
That's gonna have an impact we're gonna hear all the way up here. Bam!
It will actually change the axis of the Earth.
It will. It will. I'm looking forward to it.
Make sure you breathe out. I don't know how you take that better, but yeah, that'll be fun. Before we go, Silvercore made a great point here, and I want to throw it in here. So I have learned that finding balance in the micro may seem impossible, but in the macro, it's achievable by aligning with your values, practicing mindfulness, and embracing adaptability. And I really wanted to.
I dig it.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
So as we all try to balance our lives, as we try to, learn how to do things better, learn how to do things more efficiently, and, grow as people, and then build upon that every day. You can do that with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.
Oh.